Okay. All right, Texas Longhorns 2022 schedule preview. Now, these are not prediction videos. I do prediction videos starting in June. This is just looking at the schedules. Who are they playing in the non-con? In the conference, where who do they have at home? Who's on the road? Any tough road games? Trap games. Where's the bye week? Are there any difficult stretches of like 2 or 3 games? That kind of thing. We'll run through the schedule, kind of just get an early idea of how some of these teams might fare in 2022. Now, of course, in 2021, Texas did not have a good year. 5-7. A losing record for Steve Sarkisian and the Longhorns. Lost on the road early in the season, a non-con game, lost on the road at Arkansas. Reeled off a couple of wins before losing one of the best Red River shootouts in history, 55-48. Texas lost to Oklahoma in one of the best games of the season. And that started a long streak of L's for Texas last year, unfortunately. They lost to Oklahoma. The following week, they lost to Oklahoma State. Then they had a bye week. Then they lost at Baylor. Then they lost at Iowa State. Then they lost at home to Kansas. Then they lost on the road to West Virginia. They did finish the regular season with a win at home against Kansas State. But they were never able to recover from that overtime loss to, or not overtime loss, but 55-48 kind of last-minute loss to Oklahoma, and ended up losing, 6 games in a row before winning the final game of the year against Kansas State, finishing 5-7. So a disappointing season for Texas last year. They're looking to get it turned around in 2022. Can they do it? A lot of people expect Oklahoma maybe to take a step back, losing Lincoln Riley to Southern Cal. They bring in Brent Venables, who's a defensive mind. But the problem is, of course, there's not a whole lot of talent on Oklahoma's defense, at least not compared to what Brent Venables is used to having from his time at Clemson. I do think Brent Venables will get the Oklahoma defense turned around quickly, but it's going to take a recruiting class or two to do it. And offensively, they lost, a lot of their performance and production from last year. Of course, Caleb Williams going with Lincoln Riley to Southern Cal. They also lost their backup quarterback, Spencer Rattler, to South Carolina, lost some receivers. So a lot of people expect Oklahoma to take a step back. Can Texas take enough steps forward to compete for the Big 12? Baylor and Oklahoma State played for the Big 12 title last year. They should be good again this year. West Virginia, of course, announced today, is getting JT Daniels in the transfer portal, quarterback from Georgia. So West Virginia is better today than they were yesterday. So what can Texas do in 2022? Well, they start things off with what should be an easy non-con win against Louisiana Monroe, Week 1, Saturday, September 3rd. But Week 2, a home game against Alabama. Now, this will be a huge game. The crowd will be nuts. These are two of the biggest brands in all of college football. Clearly, right now, Alabama appears to be a much better team than Texas. Based off of what we've seen in recent years and what we know is coming back on both of these teams, and an obvious coaching advantage there for Alabama. It is a home game for Texas, so you do have that going for you. This isn't a prediction video, like I said, but Texas, man, that you will be a significant underdog in this game. Doesn't mean you can't win, but the odds will be against you in that one. And then your last non-con game of the year, also at home. So 3 non-con home games to kick the season off. The last one against UTSA, University of Texas, San Antonio. That would be an embarrassing loss for Texas to lose that game to a smaller in-state school like that. Don't expect it to happen. Probably 2-1 to start the season, right? If you wanted to do a prediction right now, looks like probably 2-1. And then the conference schedule, of course, the Big 12 has 10 teams for no particular reason. They play 9 conference games, round robin, so you play every team in your conference, so 9 conference games. First conference game of the year, Saturday, September 4th, on the road at Texas Tech. Texas Tech kind of been wallowing in their own misery for several years. Not a very good program right now. It is a road game, but still one that you would think Texas would have a good chance of winning. And then they get West Virginia at home, and this could be an interesting game because if you're looking for dark horses in the Big 12 this year, of course, you can't count Oklahoma as a dark horse. You just can't. Baylor and Oklahoma State played for the Big 12 title last year, so they're not really dark horses this year. I think the 2 dark horse picks to compete to win the Big 12 this year would be Texas and West Virginia. They play early in the season, Saturday, October 1st. I would say the winner of this game is in pretty good shape heading into the back half of the season. Texas really needs to win that one, too, because the following week they had the Red River Shootout, neutral site game at the Cotton Bowl, Dallas, Texas, every year. Red River Shootout against Oklahoma. Again, a great game last year, 55-48 or whatever it was, won in the last minute of the game. Devastating loss for Texas. The first in a streak of 6 games that Texas ended up losing in a row last year. This should be another great game this year. Then you come back home to take on Iowa State, one of the more disappointing teams, not just in the Big 12, but really in all of the Power 5 last year. Ranked in almost everyone's preseason top 10 and just never really able to get it going last year. So Matt Campbell and company looking to get back on a good foot this year. Then you go on the road, another big game here at Oklahoma State. You can't afford to lose. When you talk about these conference games, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, Baylor, these are games Texas can't afford to lose more than maybe one of them if they want to make the Big 12 title game, I think. This is the road game here at Oklahoma State. Tough place to play. We'll see how it goes. And then you get your bye week. So what do you play, 8 games there and then get your bye week? I don't particularly like where this bye week falls if I'm Texas. I would rather have my bye week maybe before or after the Oklahoma game. You know, if Texas would have had a bye week after last year's Oklahoma game, maybe they don't lose 6 games in a row. You know, that was a devastating loss. Last second emotional loss in one of the greatest Red River shootouts of all time. And Texas was not able to get over it by the following week, obviously, when they caught another L, and then it just got worse from there. I don't really like having this bye week here either. If I'm Texas, I'd rather have this before or after Oklahoma, or maybe even before that game at Oklahoma State. But it is what it is. You get the bye week October 29th. That gives you 2 weeks to prepare for a road game at Kansas State. Must-win game for Texas. I talk about this a lot of times when I talk about teams that are like Texas, right? Teams that we know have the ability to be good, to be really good, because we've seen them do it before in our lifetimes. You know, Texas, Tennessee, Miami, Florida State, Southern Cal. The first step to getting back to where teams like that want to be is beating the teams you're supposed to beat on a consistent basis. That means not losing to Kansas like you did last year. That means not losing this game this coming year to Kansas State. You have to get yourself in a position where you're consistently beating the bottom half of the conference before you can consider taking the next step to a Big 12 title or a playoff appearance. So this is a game coming off of a bye week that Texas has to win here on the road at Kansas State. Then you come back home, take on TCU, new coaching staff there. Lost their running back, Zach Evans, to the transfer portal. Again, you would think a game that Texas could win. On the road at Kansas, which embarrassingly enough is a revenge game for Texas this year, taking that home loss to Kansas last year. Kansas is going to be terrible again, just like they were last year, but they beat you last year. I just can't see. I know it's fun to pick on Texas. I just can't see them losing to Kansas 2 years in a row, though. You have to assume this is a game that Texas is going to find a way to win. And you close things out at home against Baylor. And this game could be for a trip to the Big 12 title game. I mean, because everybody in the Big 12 plays each other, there's a lot of scenarios where teams could finish with the same conference record, right? And then head-to-head is going to matter. So, you know, it could come down to a thing where going into the last week of the season, you know, Baylor, Texas, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State are all tied for first or something in the Big 12, you know, or 2 or 3 of those teams or something like that. And this could be like almost like a playoff game to get into the Big 12 title game. Baylor's going to be good again this year, as is Oklahoma State. Texas is the wild card in the Big 12, in my opinion. When as far as looking at Oklahoma, it's, you know, how much of a step back do they take? To me, those are the questions about the Big 12. And West Virginia, with the addition of JT Daniels, I mean, they've got a lot of issues outside of quarterback. JT Daniels does make them better. Right now, I would still put West Virginia in a tier below those other teams, though, honestly. And then if Texas makes it, of course, the Big 12 title game the first Saturday in December on December 3rd. So, obviously, the non-con, the Alabama game is the game that stands out. The other 2 are games that Texas should easily win. They're both at home against lower classification Group of 5 schools. Those are games that Texas has to win. The Alabama game, look, Texas can lose to Alabama and still have a great season, if they can reel off some wins in the Big 12 and get to the Big 12 title game. You can't let that loss to Alabama, which is likely what's going to happen. Now, you can't let a potential loss to Alabama ruin the rest of your season, right? You should be able to get off to a good start in the Big 12 with the first game being against Texas Tech, even though it's on the road. And then West Virginia, you get it home. So you have an opportunity really to start the season. What would that be? 1, 2, 3, 4-1, maybe, heading into that game against Oklahoma. That would be ideal for Texas. That's Oklahoma, Iowa State, Oklahoma State 3 weeks in a row. Throw West Virginia in there too. That's not an easy stretch of games there. Coming out of your bye week, you get a fairly easy matchup against Kansas State. And in the last kind of fourth of your schedule there, TCU, Kansas, and Baylor is very manageable. Baylor will be good, but the other two teams, not so much. So I think that's a pretty manageable schedule for Texas. There's some key game. Obviously, the Oklahoma game, key every single year. I think that Baylor game at the end of the year could be huge. And on the road at Oklahoma State, I think, are the biggest games. I know Alabama's the game everybody's talking about because two huge name programs there, but in terms of goals that Texas has or trying to get to the Big 12 title game, the Alabama game almost doesn't even matter. Texas is not a playoff team this year. So the goal should be finding a way to get to the Big 12 title game, and to do that, the Alabama game doesn't matter. Oklahoma, Baylor, Oklahoma State. How many of those games can you win? And can you avoid the head-scratching losses that have plagued you for the last 15 years? Don't lose to Kansas. Don't lose to Kansas State. Don't lose to Texas Tech. Anyway, what do y'all think Texas record will be? Again, I do my prediction videos starting in June. I do basically this same thing where I put the schedule up on the screen. But instead of just talking about the schedule, I'll tell you exactly what I think is going to happen in every single game, and I'll give you a win-loss record and let you know who they're going to beat and who they're going to lose to. I start that in June. But let me know down below what y'all think. Texas Longhorns 2022.